I received the letter on a Tuesday morning in October, while making coffee in my small apartment in Tacoma. The ivory envelope, stamped with the logo of some law firm I'd never heard of, sent a chill through my palm before I even opened it. The name, Michael T. Grayson, my biological father, was printed in bold at the top. The man who had vanished from my life when I was 8. My name is Audrey. I'm 31 years old. And I haven't heard a single apology from him in the past 23 years. When I tore open the envelope, my hands were trembling like I was signing my own sentence. The paper was thick, the black lettering cold and formal. We regret to inform you that Mr. Michael T. Grayson passed away on October 2nd. The will reading will be held on Friday at the office of Whitaker and Lane, Seattle. I froze. A part of me had already believed he'd died long ago. In memory, in spirit. But this time it was real. He was gone. And somehow, still managed to leave behind one last mess. Like a farewell gift. "What's wrong, Audrey? You've gone pale," said Rachel, my best friend, from the kitchen, holding half a slice of toast. I handed her the letter silently. She scanned it quickly and looked up. "Grayson? That's your dad?" I nodded. "He's dead. And I'm invited to the will reading." "You're actually going?" Rachel frowned, anger rising in her voice. "After everything he did?" I let out a dry laugh. "What exactly is everything?" "He didn't fight. He didn't call. No letters, not a single dime in support. The last time I saw him was on my 8th birthday. He gave me a teddy bear, then left." Rachel sat across from me. "So why go?" I glanced back down at the letter. "I don't know, maybe to look his new family in the eyes? His new wife? 2 new kids? Maybe I need to hear him deny me one last time, this time from the grave." That afternoon my mom called. Her voice was brittle. "Did you get the letter?" "Yeah. When did you find out?" 3 days ago. I saw the obituary in the local section." She paused. "Are you planning to go?" I didn't respond right away. My head was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. "I'm not going for the money," I finally said. "I just want to know if he ever thought about me." My mom sighed. "Audrey, some questions are better left unanswered." I stayed silent. On Friday morning, I wore a dark gray pantsuit, pulled my hair back neatly. Not to impress, but to armor up. Like stepping into a battlefield. The downtown Seattle office building shimmered with glass and steel. I stepped into the elevator, gripping my handbag like it carried every remaining piece of my childhood. When the conference room doors opened, I saw them, the 3 people who had replaced me in my father's life. A woman around 50 in an expensive cream dress. A young man with a cold stare. A girl younger than him who looked at me as if I didn't belong there. Whitaker, the older attorney, stood up to greet me. "Ms. Audrey Keller, please, have a seat." I nodded, avoiding eye contact with the others. "Now that everyone is here," he said, flipping open a thick folder, "let's begin." I sat across from them, my hands clenched into fists beneath the table. I had prepared for anything, yet a silent fear still surged through me. Eliza Grayson, the woman my father chose after my mother, sat with the 2 children he raised as his own. Thomas, about 25, sharp-featured with eyes like blades, and Lily, barely 20, dressed like she'd stepped out of a high-end TV drama. All 3 looked at me, like I was an ink stain on the crisp white linen of their polished mourning. Attorney Whitaker cleared his throat and opened the file. "This is the official last will and testament of Mr. Michael T. Grayson, signed on July 18th of this year." I remained silent, my heart beating in cold, steady thuds. "In this document Mr. Grayson declares, I leave all real estate, stocks, liquid assets and personal investments to my 2 children, Thomas and Lily Grayson, to be divided equally." My brow furrowed. Whitaker's voice continued, but my ears started ringing. The name Audrey didn't appear. Not a mention, not a footnote, Not even a hint that he had a daughter living just an hour away. Whitaker closed the folder. That concludes the primary contents of the will, unless there are any questions. Wait, my voice came out sharper than I intended. Are you absolutely sure there's no appendix? No clause, nothing else? Whitaker looked up. I'm afraid not, Miss Keller. The will is very clear. Thomas chuckled under his breath, the sound hollow and echoing. You came here expecting a piece of it? After all these years? Lily glanced at me, her lips curled, like she'd just spotted trash on a leather chair. He never even mentioned you. I gripped my bag tightly, nails digging into the strap. Really? Then what about the pictures? The park trips? The birthday videos with him behind the camera? I let out a bitter laugh. Maybe his memory was erased the day he married your mom. Eliza, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. He wasn't perfect, but Michael kept what served him. What didn't, he discarded. Whitaker exhaled. If there are no legal objections, I'll adjourn this reading. I stood up. This isn't about legality, it's about the truth, and I intend to find it. No one replied. They didn't need to. To them, I had never existed. Outside the building, I called my mother. She wasn't surprised. I figured, she said. He left you out, didn't he? I nodded, wiping away tears that had come uninvited. Not a word, like I was never part of him. I kept everything, Audrey. Photos, letters, even clippings. If you really want the truth, come home. We'll start from the beginning. That evening, I drove 3 hours to Spokane. When I opened the door to my childhood home, the same one I'd left after college, Mom was sitting in the living room surrounded by 3 neatly arranged cardboard boxes. Her expression softened when she saw me, though I could still see the quiet anger at the corners of her mouth. I spent the whole afternoon going through these, she said, pulling one box closer. Remember those letters your father wrote during the first year after the divorce? I never mailed them, but he did write them. I opened a yellowed envelope. His familiar handwriting slanted and steady. Dear Audrey, I'm sorry. I drew a sharp breath. Beneath it was a photo of him holding me as a baby. On the back, in blue ink, the day I knew I could love, for real. I looked up, my eyes met my mother's. Something changed him, Audrey. He didn't walk away for no reason. Maybe someone, or something, made him choose. I didn't respond. But deep down I knew. This wasn't the end. It was only the first crack in everything I thought I knew about the past. I sat in the middle of the old living room, soft yellow light spilling over handwritten letters and time-worn photographs. Every piece of paper, every stroke of my father's handwriting stabbed at the same question. If he truly loved me, how could he let me grow up under the weight of such brutal silence? My mother carefully turned the pages of an old photo album, her hands trembling slightly as she paused at a picture of my father holding me at the beach. That summer, she said quietly. He called you the only light in the chaos of his life. He wasn't perfect, but he did love you, deeply. Until the doorbell cut her off. I glanced at her. I didn't call anyone. She went to answer it. A middle-aged man stood at the porch in a black shirt and long coat. He removed his glasses and nodded politely. Hello. I'm Charles Melton. I was Michael Grayson's private attorney. I stood, tension bristling across my shoulders. Why are you here? There's something Mr. Grayson left for you, he said, his voice gravelly like it had weathered decades of hard negotiations. He came to my office 3 months ago, requesting a new will. One that included your name. But, he paused, his expression darkening. He died before it could be finalized. I took a half step back. So, I was meant to be added to the will? Yes, but legally it never took effect. However, he continued, opening a weathered brown leather case. He left a USB drive and a handwritten letter. instructing me to give them to you if anything happened unexpectedly. My mother covered her mouth. Michael! He was planning for this. I took the USB drive. It felt heavier than any piece of hardware I'd ever held. Mr. Grayson insisted only you view the contents, Charles said. I never opened it. But he warned, if it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be severe. I thanked him and plugged it into my laptop immediately. The screen lit up. Hundreds of files appeared. Emails, audio recordings, internal memos, financial documents, all flagged in red. I opened a folder labeled CHN Confessional. The first lines stole my breath. Evidence of embezzlement, abuse of power, and financial manipulation by Charles H. Grayson, my father-in-law and current CEO of Grayson Holdings. I collapsed into the chair. Dad collected evidence against his own father-in-law. Eliza's father, my mom asked, her voice tight with shock. I nodded. And more. There are documents showing Charles forced Dad to transfer patents worth tens of millions of dollars, threatening to have my scholarship pulled if he refused. Mom burst into tears. So, he didn't abandon you. He was forced. I skimmed through a series of audio files. One, titled July 14th, Final Conversation, sent a chill down my spine. My father's voice, weary, resolute. If I die, I want Audrey to know everything. I won't let Charles control it all. I'll bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. Then a second voice, colder than ice. If you open your mouth, I swear it won't just be you. That girl, your ex-wife, they'll all be crushed. I slammed the laptop shut, my whole body frozen. We have to bring this out, I said, my voice raw. My mom laid a hand on my shoulder. Slowly, Audrey. If he made those threats, it means he still has power. We have to be smart. No, Mom. I've lived in silence long enough. It's time the name Audrey Keller takes its rightful place in the real history of the Grayson family. I looked out the window. Night had started to fall over the neighborhood. But inside me, a fire had been lit, brighter and fiercer than any silence could ever smother. The following afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Alone. Don't tell anyone. It was from Lily Grayson. I hesitated. Part of me thought it might be a trap. But after what I found on the USB, I knew I couldn't keep investigating alone. I replied, Haven's Corner Cafe, 6 o'clock. I arrived early, choosing a window seat. When Lily entered, she wore a gray hoodie pulled over her head, her eyes darting like someone carrying guilt. She sat down without looking at me. I know you don't trust me, she whispered. But I need you to believe this. Your father didn't just walk out of your life, he was forced to, by my grandfather. I gripped my coffee cup. I'm listening. My dad found out Charles Grayson, my grandfather, was using the company to launder money. He didn't speak up. Not at first. But eventually he started documenting everything in a journal. I found it in his office, after he died. She pulled a worn leather notebook from her bag. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. Lily pushed it toward me. Thomas knows about it too, and he'll do whatever it takes to keep it from you. My stomach dropped. You mean? And he's watching you. Maybe even my mom knows. You need to leave, now. I jumped up, Lily grabbed my wrist. Wait! There's someone who can help you. He used to work in internal accounting. His name is Derek Hoyt. My dad trusted him. I took out my phone and saved the name. Just then, the cafe door burst open. Thomas walked in, scanning every table. Go, Lily hissed. We slipped out the back, bolted through an alley, and split up at the first cross street. I sprinted into a parking lot, heart pounding. In the rearview mirror, I saw Thomas chasing Lily's direction. I drove off, clutching the journal to my chest. That night at my mother's house, I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook. Each page was a dagger. Today he demanded I sign over patent rights. Said if I refused, Audrey would lose her scholarship. I didn't sign. 2 weeks later it was gone. Audrey will hate me. But if I confront him directly, he'll destroy her and her mother. Every word was proof my father fought in silence, shielding me however he could. I called Derek using the number Lily gave me. A cautious male voice answered. "Who is this?" "This is Audrey Keller. I'm Michael Grayson's daughter. I need to talk." "About Charles Grayson." 3 seconds of silence. "Meet me at the Elmwood gas station, 1 a.m. Come alone." He arrived on time. Derek, a salt-and-pepper-haired man with sharp, tired eyes, tossed a thick folder onto the passenger seat. "I kept this to protect myself. But if you're really Michael's daughter, I owe him." Inside were forged contracts, shady wire transfers, names of shell corporations, and Charles Grayson's signature. When Michael refused to sign these documents, Charles tightened control over his entire life. His family, his job, his finances, even his health. I think he orchestrated Michael's sudden death. I gripped the steering wheel. "If I bring this forward, will he be prosecuted?" Derek gave a grim smile. "If you live long enough to make it happen." I drove home just as dawn broke. My mother stood on the porch, pale. Thomas came by. He ransacked the front yard. I didn't let him in. "But he knows you're holding something." I handed her the journal and whispered, "Keep it safe. I have a plan." "What are you going to do, Audrey?" I met her gaze, steady. "I'm going to expose the name Grayson. But I'm not doing it alone." And I knew I needed Lily. She was the only key left in the house of lies Charles had built. Lily and I sat in the temporary apartment I rented under a false name in Auburn. Outside rain tapped steadily against the eaves, but my mind was far louder. On the table lay my father's journal, the stack of documents Derek had handed me, and the USB drive brought by attorney Charles Melton. The final pieces of a rotten puzzle. Money laundering, illegal patent transfers, bribery of federal officials, and even evidence surrounding his death. I played the final voice memo from the digital journal for Lily. My father's voice was hoarse. "Charles said if I keep digging he won't hesitate to make this permanent. Today I saw someone standing near the house. I'm not sure how much time I have left to finish this." Lily held her head. "You have the proof. It's clear." "Why haven't you gone to the FBI?" I looked at her. "Because if we go alone, it'll be buried. Charles has people inside. The one thing he can't control, everything going public, all at once, in a place he'd never expect." "You mean?" "The emergency shareholders meeting tomorrow. They think I won't show up." We coordinated with FBI agent Mark Ellison the next morning at 8 a.m. He was one of the few Derek trusted, someone who had investigated Charles before, but was quietly removed from the case. "You're planning to reveal everything at the meeting?" Ellison asked, eyes fixed on the journal. "Yes, and I need the FBI ready. Once I speak, they'll react, either by fleeing or fighting." He nodded. "We'll have the building surrounded, but be careful. Charles doesn't lose quietly." That morning, the Grayson Holdings conference hall buzzed with overpriced suits, strained handshakes, and hollow congratulations. I walked in like a thorn in their side. And I knew it. Thomas sat in the front row, caught my eye, and smirked. The kind of smile worn by men who think they're still in control. Charles Grayson entered shortly after. He carried the same unnerving composure, though to me, he was no longer a patriarch. Just a cold mask stretched over a collapsing empire. When the meeting chair began to speak, I stood up. "I have an urgent statement regarding this company's assets, legacy, and leadership ethics," I said loudly and clearly. "My name is Audrey Keller. I'm the only daughter of the late chief engineer Michael Grayson, and today, I'm going to show you the truth." I connected my laptop to the main screen. Documents appeared: offshore bank accounts, forged patent transfers, photographs of bribe payments disguised as consulting fees, ledgers of payouts to government officials. The room fell silent, then whispers. Charles stood abruptly. "This is slander, you have no authority here." "Then how about this recording?" I asked, pressing play. "If you don't sign, I'll cut off her scholarship, she'll have no future. And if you open your mouth, the only thing left of you will be a body." Charles paled. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Thomas lunged toward the laptop, but an undercover FBI agent stepped in his way. Just then, Agent Ellison entered with a full FBI team. "Charles Howard Grayson," he said firmly. "You are under arrest for money laundering, bribery, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice." "Who?" Thomas screamed. "Dad, do something!" Charles snarled, backing away. "You think a bastard daughter can bring down everything I built?" I stepped forward, eyes steady. "No. But my father started it. I'm just finishing what he couldn't." FBI agents cuffed Charles, his face contorted in rage. Thomas was subdued moments later for interfering with law enforcement. As the last people filed out, I stood alone, facing the glowing screen. A photo of my father holding my hand in the park when I was 6 lit up the wall. I reached out, brushing the image softly. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "I did it." But I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the first door swinging open, leading into a legal war, a media storm, and the reckoning with a truth this country was about to face. King County Federal Courthouse, on a freezing winter morning, held a tension so thick it nearly pressed the air out of my lungs. I walked in gripping my father's journal like it was the only compass I had through the maze of power and deceit I'd been thrown into. Lily walked beside me, silent but unwavering. The front rows were packed with reporters, shareholders, and familiar faces who once bowed to Charles Grayson, now avoiding my gaze. The defendants were brought in. Charles wore a dark suit, but the arrogance had drained from his posture. Beside him, Thomas sat cuffed, pale. I recognized that look in their eyes. The dawning realization that truth can't be buried forever. The prosecutor began with solid evidence: forged financial statements, illicit wire transfers, stolen patents, recorded threats, and altered internal agreements. Each slide was a blade peeling back decades of polished deceit. "Our next piece of evidence," the prosecutor declared, "is the personal journal of Mr. Michael Grayson, a detailed account of his efforts to gather proof over 7 years. I was called to the stand. "Your name?" "Audrey Keller." "Can you tell the court who gave you this journal?" "Charles Grayson's youngest daughter, Lily Grayson. She found it in my father's office after he passed." "And do you confirm this was written by Mr. Michael Grayson?" "I recognize his handwriting. And many entries match events documented in his letters and audio recordings he left." The courtroom fell silent as I read the final line of the journal. "If I die, it won't be an accident. If someone holds this journal, use it to protect Audrey. I've been silent for too long." My voice cracked, but I refused to cry. When my father's last recorded phone call with Derek Hoyt played, his confession of being threatened and the looming accident, every eye turned to Charles. Then came the surprise witness. Roy Chandler, once presumed dead in a 6-year-old accident, now stepped onto the stand. In truth, he had been under witness protection after secretly collaborating with Michael. "I was the one who signed off on the fake patent transfers," Roy said. "Michael found out and had me record every closed-door meeting. I still have the originals." The room gasped. Charles shot to his feet. "This is lying. He's supposed to be dead." "Are you admitting to silencing a witness?" the judge asked coldly. Charles sat back down, but it was too late. The trial lasted 5 more days. On sentencing day, not a single seat in the courtroom was empty. The judge looked Charles Grayson in the eye. "You are sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole, for charges including federal bribery, money laundering, corporate fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." I gripped Lily's hand as the sentence landed. The room buzzed in disbelief, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Steady, because justice had finally arrived. The judge turned to Thomas. For your cooperation in providing information leading to the principal arrest, you are sentenced to 15 years, with parole eligibility after 10. Thomas bowed his head, silent. Maybe for the first time, he understood what it cost to stand on the wrong side of truth. As I stepped down from the witness stand, Agent Ellison approached. You changed the game. Not just for your family. For everyone Charles tried to bury. I nodded. I didn't do it alone. Lily squeezed my hand tighter. I turned back one last time as Charles was led away in cuffs. No longer powerful. No longer smug. Just a man. Stripped bare before the truth. Dad was right. Truth was the one thing they couldn't buy. And I had reclaimed it. With everything he left behind for me. 3 weeks after the trial, I stood in the grand atrium of what used to be Grayson Holdings, now stripped of its old emblems, its legacy of fear and manipulation dismantled piece by piece. Beside me was Lily, and behind us stood a new generation of stakeholders, young inventors, returning employees, people once pushed to the margins. We had taken the company back. Not to walk the same path, but to rebuild it from the ground up. From this day forward, I announced at our first press conference, Grayson Holdings, as Charles Grayson built it, no longer exists. What once served corruption, control, and exploitation will now serve innovation, integrity, and community. I pulled the red velvet cover from our new logo. Applause filled the hall as Everlight Innovations lit up in clean, bold letters, replacing a name that once symbolized greed. We chose this name because real light never goes out, I continued, eyes fixed on the portrait of my father now mounted on the main wall. Because no matter how long it's buried, truth finds its way back. The road to rebuilding was brutal. We had to renegotiate nearly every contract, vet the entire staff list, and cut off dozens of murky relationships. More than 200 employees resigned once they learned the backdoor perks of the old regime were gone. I had no regrets. With every difficult decision I signed, I thought of my father, the man who shielded me from the shadows, at the cost of his life. I knew he'd be proud. Lily, nearly a decade younger than me, showed strength far beyond her age. She led the human resources overhaul, creating a culture grounded in collaboration and ethics. I want to turn the building that once terrified my father, she told me, into a place where people can dream big, without fearing their dreams will be stolen. We dedicated 60% of our first-year profits to establish the Michael Grayson Grant, a fund supporting independent inventors and public school engineering students nationwide. In just 2 months, over 1,200 applications poured in. One of the earliest was a high schooler from El Paso, who built an air filtration device using plastic waste. I personally called him to say he'd been selected. His voice trembled. Thank you. I didn't think someone like me ever had a chance. It's people like you, I said, who are the real future of this country. The press was skeptical at first. Some outlets dubbed me the woman romanticizing justice, claiming our model couldn't survive in the real business world. But by the first quarter, Everlight's revenue was up 38%. Thanks to expanding our innovation network across Washington and Oregon. We partnered with universities, post-COVID abandoned startups, and retired engineers eager to give back. We transformed the 14th floor into an open lab space, where young inventors could prototype for free, receive mentorship, and have their IP protected from day one. One late evening, I stood in what used to be Charles's office, now mine. The room had been repainted a soft ash blue. The heavy mahogany desk was gone, replaced with a simple glass one. On the bookshelf sat my father's journal, secured in a display case. Lily entered with 2 glasses of wine. For him, she said, raising her glass. For everyone who was forced into silence, I added. We clinked glasses, and I felt it, not an ending, but a beginning. One not weighed down by the ghosts of power, but carried forward by what Charles Grayson never understood: trust, integrity, and a legacy built not on fear, but light. 9 months after the trial, Everlight Innovations was no longer a newcomer in the industry. We had done what many said was impossible: fully compensating all 68 individuals and businesses harmed by Charles Grayson and his former regime. We didn't mail checks. I invited each person to our headquarters, not to hand out gifts, but to listen. Each one carried a vivid story of loss, resilience, and unfinished dreams. A doctor who lost her clinic after refusing to sell her patent to Grayson. A former engineer whose reputation was destroyed so Charles could steal his research. I looked each of them in the eye and said only one thing: I'm sorry. On behalf of an entire system that failed you. We returned assets, added interest, and offered non-refundable seed funding for those wanting to restart their projects. Many cried. Some stayed silent, but all of them held my hand tightly. Lily, in her quiet strength, established a mental health support fund. Everlight Restore for those emotionally devastated by their battles with the former company. No press, no credit. She left just one line in our internal memo: we don't heal with profit, we heal with decency. At the same time, we launched the Foundry, a national platform supporting independent inventors. Everlight's tech team built an app that allowed engineers, students, farmers, even everyday tinkerers to file for intellectual property protection in under 72 hours. The Foundry spread faster than expected. In just 5 weeks, over 8,000 ideas were registered, from climate sensors for farms to energy solutions for electric wheelchairs. A group of high school students in Nebraska even invented a low-cost biodegradable plastic. I flew there to deliver the funding myself. Standing in the school gym, surrounded by cheering students and teachers, I said, my father believed good ideas can come from anywhere, not from power but from heart. That night, returning to Seattle, I found my mother sitting in her old living room chair, thumbing through a frayed family album. On the table were 2 cardboard boxes, one dated 2003, the other, hand-packed by my father in 2011, never sent. Harry wrote to you all those years, she said, voice tight. But he was afraid. Afraid you'd never forgive him. I opened the box. Inside were over 20 letters. Each began the same way. Audrey, if you're reading this. One described a Montana sunset during a business trip. Another said, he cried after seeing my college graduation photo online. And one, I read it slowly. If someday you're able to rebuild what I lost, use your name. Not Grayson, your name, Audrey Keller, because you are the most beautiful legacy I've ever had. I hugged my mother without words. The next day, I returned to the office and requested a new sign be installed at the main entrance. Not just Everlight Innovations, but a line underneath. Inspired by Michael Keller. We also reconnected with those who once stood by my father, Roy Chandler, Derek Hoyt, and the retired engineers who had been forced out. Not only did they return, they became senior advisors for the Foundry. Michael once told me, Roy said in a boardroom meeting, that the next generation doesn't need to be led by money. They need to be led by belief. You've done exactly that, Audrey. For the first time, I no longer felt alone. The network my father once dreamed of had come alive, strong, united, and driven by a single mission: to protect those who dare to think differently and create good in the world. As the sun set over the Everlight building, I stood by the window, holding a photo of my father smiling. Not in a corporate suit, but in a t-shirt. Standing in the apple orchard behind our old house. I smiled back. I thought I had known everything about my father, about the quiet years he spent fighting, the evidence he gathered, the sacrifices he never voiced. But on a March afternoon, when a records clerk called to say a personal safe, registered under the name Michael Keller, had been discovered behind a false wall in an old Grayson Holdings warehouse, I knew there was still something he wanted to leave behind. The safe was modest in size, hidden with intention. I went with my mother and Lily. It required both a code and a fingerprint to unlock. Inside, everything was arranged with almost reverent care. There was a mahogany box, engraved with the words, "For Audrey, if you find light in the ruins." I lifted the lid. Inside were 2 silver hand-engraved lockets, each shaped like a small star nested in a celestial circle, resembling a personal star map. On the back, "There's always a way home." One locket already held a childhood photo of me. The other frame was left empty. My mother gasped through tears. "Had them made in 2006, she whispered. "That's when he planned to see you again. But then," her voice cracked, "he was afraid he'd only hurt you more." I gripped the locket, feeling the cool metal, heavy not from weight but from all the years of unspoken love it carried. Below the box was a stack of documents, each page handwritten by my father, outlining a detailed plan not only to expose Charles, but to rebuild the system he once believed to be untouchable. "If you're reading this, then you've done what I could not," the first line read. "But Everlight shouldn't just be a company. It must be a shield for those who were silenced by the very hands that forced me quiet." He had mapped out partnerships with public technical universities, secret scholarships he'd funded for nearly a decade. There was a list of people blacklisted by the industry simply for opposing Charles, with a note: "These should be the first people invited back." In a smaller envelope was a file labeled Aurora Project, a dedicated tech center for women engineers. My father had written, "If the next generation of women can create without being dismissed or excluded, then I'll know my life meant something." That evening, we returned to Everlight's headquarters. Lily stood in the central office, with the Aurora file in her hands. "I want to make this real," she said. "And I want it to carry his name." I nodded. Not just his name, his spirit. 3 months later, the Aurora Center opened in Denver, Colorado, the city where my father began his career. On opening day, I wore his locket, and Lily wore the other. Together we cut the ribbon in front of hundreds of female STEM students, retired professors, and those my father had quietly helped over the years. "Michael Keller wasn't just a father," I said at the podium. "He believed in the power of small people with big ideas." Today, we carry that belief forward, not in promises, but in practice. After the ceremony, my mother handed me one final letter she had kept all these years. It was handwritten, carefully sealed and marked, "To Audrey. If you find your own way." I read it alone in my office. "My daughter, I'm sorry you had to walk so far without a guide. But that's why you became exactly who I always knew you could be. Strong, steady, uncompromising with the dark. I never wanted you to be anyone but yourself. And if you ever feel alone, remember, you carry the light, not just from me, but from everyone you've helped rise again. Never doubt your worth. I have always loved you." Michael Keller. I folded the letter and placed it in the left-hand drawer of my desk. After everything lost, I no longer searched for endings. That morning, sunlight streamed through the glass facade of Everlight's high-rise headquarters like a silent reminder. Some wounds need time, but some ideals must begin before they ever fully heal. I stood outside the main conference hall, where the National Technology Ethics Summit was underway. For the first time since the Charles Grayson scandal, a private company had been invited to host, and Everlight was chosen. Not because we were flawless, but because we had risen from the wreckage left by those who once abused power. The hall was full. On stage, the Everlight logo glowed in soft white, with a new tagline beneath it: "Ethics isn't a choice, it's the foundation." I began with a story. I was once a name erased from my own family records. I stood in court and no one called me my father's daughter. But from that very place I learned, titles don't define worth. Truth and courage rewrite history. Applause followed. But I didn't stop for applause. I spoke about the changes Everlight had implemented, our open governance model, the internal whistleblower protections, and quarterly transparent financial disclosures. A practice no private tech firm had ever voluntarily adopted before. "We're not building an empire," I said firmly, "we're building trust." Then Lily took the stage to share the progress of the Aurora Incubator, where hundreds of inventions were now being tested in the real world. She didn't give a long speech. Instead, she played a short video, young Latina girls in Texas, building robots from recycled parts, captioned simply, "Sponsored by Everlight." As I stepped off the stage, I saw Roy Chandler, the former engineer ousted by Grayson, waiting in the back row. "You once said my father wasn't just an engineer," I said. Roy smiled. "And today, you proved that true. Not with words, with how you live." On the way back to my office, my phone buzzed. An email from the Department of Commerce. A formal invitation for Everlight to be a lead partner in a new federal program for sustainable innovation. I replied with just 2 words. "We're ready." But even as recognition came, I never forgot. This journey wasn't just about justice for my father. It was for the thousands who were forced into silence, who had to choose between career and conscience. And we, the generation that followed, had a duty to choose differently. To choose right. That evening, Lily invited me and my mother for dinner at the former Grayson family apartment, now transformed into a community residence for young women in STEM. The kitchen still had its warm glow, but it no longer harbored secrets. Now it sparked workshops and mentorship circles. After dinner, my mother handed me a sealed box. This was found in the second secured safe in Montana, addressed and postmarked in 2002. "The day you graduated high school." Inside was a USB, converted from a VHS tape. I plugged it in. Grainy footage appeared. My father in a winter coat, standing in a snowy field. Wind howled. But he looked straight into the camera. "Audrey, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but if you do, it means you've gone further than anyone in this family ever dared, and I hope, even if someday you feel lost, you'll remember, the light doesn't come from outside. It comes from you." The screen faded to black, but I sat still. Not from grief, but from knowing that, after everything, I was exactly where I needed to be. Everlight still faces challenges. We continue to stand against old-world corporations trying to buy us out or steer us off course. But now I know. Real values aren't for sale. We don't need to win every battle. We just need to stand firm. We just need to do what's right. Because real light is when you look in the mirror and know you haven't compromised. And for me, Audrey Keller, this journey is only beginning. Audrey Keller's story proves that justice isn't just handed down in courtrooms, it rises from the courage to confront darkness. Once erased from her own family, she became a symbol of rebuilding. Not through vengeance, but by redefining power itself. Ethics, transparency, and compassion. In a world where trust feels increasingly rare, Audrey's journey reminds us that truth, when defended with love and will, can reshape an entire generation. What are your thoughts on Audrey's journey and the legacy she's built? Share your reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family, justice, and renewal.